larger scale, if you see people like our friend Peter Garrieff, who was with us in Budapest as well, measuring DNA, making little black holes, little wormholes. The DNA is making gravity because if you look down the top, you see 10 spirals of the golden mean, just like you see in any good fractal. In fact, every living protein has that pent view for that reason.
Excuse me to interrupt, but are you saying that it's that who is the force rather than that is keeping our structure together, our human body together? Really?
Yes. I'm saying that all centripetal forces, including gravity, life force, consciousness, color, perception, are caused by fractality, which in physics can also be called phase conjugation optimized by golden mean ratio. Another way of saying it is optimized translation of vorticity, which was another one of Einstein's words for gravity, basically. So once you understand what the cause of gravity is, then you can start learning how to hold things together, like human bodies and planets that are having their atmosphere blow away. So this fractality idea is very, very, very important.
Okay, so how would this play into, let's say, anti-gravity then? Because a lot of people are, of course, looking at this as a means of propulsion. They're looking at it for other scientific experimentation and things like this. Would you say that it's possible to create our own gravitational field?
Of course. Hundreds of scientists have made capacitors that create gravity, from Townsend Brown to Naudin here in Paris. It's very, very common. What no one has explained is a principle. I was the first one to explain the principle of how they work. But capacitors that make gravity are very, very old.
Really?
And physicists who are in denial about that are just plain in denial. It's childish.
But we haven't seen it implemented yet in the mainstream, I guess, then, or
Well, the CIA has tried to hide it a little bit, but that's pretty stupid. I find that boring. But if you read what's his name's latest book on magnetohydrodynamics from galactic superwave theory, his book, the entire book is about how gravity is produced at the thrust edge of the new stealth aircraft by capacitance.
Really, that's very, very interesting. And so this idea that it would take a lot of energy to create fields like this, is that wrong? Can we create this with a small watt or voltage, an electromagnetic field?
That's what, in this latest article on the web, goldenmean.info/poleshift, I explained why Einstein should be so embarrassed about that. Because one of the most beautiful proofs that Einstein was wrong, that it takes an infinite amount of energy to move charge to the speed of light, is a pine cone. The pine cone does it beautifully. And the pine cone does it by rearranging its capacitors, called seeds, to be fractal. Oh, the person's name I was trying to think of is Paul Laviolette. Galactic superwave.
Okay, I know which one you mean.
Paul Laviolette has done some excellent physics around this.
Yeah.
And I would stand behind his work on how capacitance makes gravity, investigating Townsend Brown, etc. But going back to the pine cone, the book is called Vortex of Life or Fields of Form by Lawrence Edwards. And he's shown that the geometry of the capacitors in a pine cone is moving in and out of fractality to modulate the amount of voltage that you get from gravity, in the same way that a fresh chicken egg produces 10 to 12 millivolts from gravity by being fractal, which defines life. And any biologist that doesn't know that is not a biologist.
But the mainstream of biologists does not know this, right? They're never not teach this.
They're the same biologists who are living in aluminum buildings, which is proof that they're stupid.
I think you have something about the cage on your latest article as well, didn't you? The fact that if you put something into a cage like seeds and whatnot, it actually dies, right?
That's right. Plant seeds in an aluminum cup and you'll watch them die. Plant the same seeds in a paramagnetic stone cup, you can watch them live. The difference is called a phase conjugate dielectric, which is another name for a fractal field. So fractal fields create life. Fields which are not fractal create death. And that's what aluminum and steel buildings do. They are stupid. Basically, they prevent your aura from achieving charge propagation efficiency.
Really?
And that defines life.
And so
that's measurable.
Sorry to cut you off, but it has nothing to do with the shape or even geometry then of the building. It's actually the material itself.
It has everything to do with the shape and geometry.
Right.
The shape and geometry, however, starts with the molecular shape, which will then be fractal to the building shape. Do you get it?
I see. Of course. Yes.
So when a living seashell is ground up, the paramagnetic and phase conjugate nature of its dielectric, the limestone, is perfect for a building because it's fractal. Now, if you were to arrange that stone into a geometry which is also phase conjugate and fractal, namely pent, or based on golden ratio, you make an electric field that's fractal, microcosmically and macrocosmically. And then you measure the fractality in that air. You can see examples on our website with Karatkov's GDV device. And you've measured whether or not it's sacred space. And you've predicted whether or not it'll cause a seed to germinate. So the only way architects should get paychecks is if they build an electric field that causes seeds to grow.
How about that? That's really interesting.
That's the definition of biologic architecture. We had 300 international specialists in architecture at our first international symposium on biologic architecture. I wrote the curriculum in Mexico City 2 years ago. This year's conference will be in Cardiff, Wales in early October.
Really? Can everyone attend this, or is this closed?
Sure.
Oh, really?
No, it's a very open event. We have some of the leading biologic architects of planet Earth, Olda from Prague and Michael Rice from Ireland, goldenmean.info/architecture. It starts with the film from Ron Eglash presenting fractality in African architecture. So if you see that the shape of the building was a cup shape, and then the inside of it, the shape of the chief shaman's house hut was a cup shape, and then inside that, the altar where he would talk to his elders was also a smaller cup shape, and that's called fractal. And so the place where you can speak with the elders, called sacred, is a place where the air is fractal due to the fractality of the architecture. And that's what Karatkov measured when he measured where the Kogi shaman were able to speak with their elders, their ancestors. That's called fractality in air. It corresponds to fractality in water, called redox potential, which is a measurability of any liquid to make life.
Redox potential. And tell us a little bit more about how this was being measured again. Is a particular device or that measured the electricity in the air or the field around us? Okay.
Yeah, so let's talk about something known first, the example of the liquids.
Yes.
In liquid, there's something called biologic terrain analysis by bioelectronics of Vincent. And basically you measure pH, redox, and resistance. And you can predict the ability of any liquid to support life. It's called biologic terrain analysis. And when you computerize that, analyze urine, blood, saliva, you can do the most profound medical diagnostic. So it turns out that redox potential, which is charge distribution efficiency, or electron availability to react, it defines fractality. So redox potential, or fractality, for example, is how you tell if there's cancer in a cell. If the water's fractal, you will not have cancer. It's real, it's very hard, well-known chemistry. Now, what's much less known is that fractality in air defines ability to propagate life in exactly the same way, because life equals charge distribution efficiency. That's what you mean when you say to be divine. And of course, fractality is what creates distribution efficiency because it's perfect compression and therefore perfect distribution. So fractality in air so far has been measured best with Professor Karatkov's device, the GDV, gas discharge visualization, in St. Petersburg. And we just brought him to UK twice to present at our symposium. You know that the GDV has measured the aura for fractality for years, and that's how we define bliss and teach peak perception. The kids who were blind but could see without their eyes, one of the ways you can tell they've achieved bliss or peak perception is their aura gets fractal. With the GDV gas discharge visualization, which is basically just the Cadillac of Kirlian high voltage discharge photography.
Oh.
But apply that to air, basically you're just measuring the ability of a spark to propagate its charge. And the reason you feel bliss in fractal air is precisely because your spark is able to propagate. So charge propagation efficiency in air is something we desperately need to teach architects. That's basically how you can tell a metal building will kill you, because the air is not fractal inside of it. Another way to measure that, by the way, is you just take a simple capacitor, it costs 20 cents, and you spectrum analyze the voltage arriving there. If it's harmonically exclusive, that environment will kill a seed. If it's harmonically inclusive, called fractal, that environment will germinate a seed.
Explain those terms a little bit more for us. Exclusive, in regards to if you take one of these capacitors, tell us more about that.
Let's take the aluminum building that a stupid biologist is sitting inside of, and you spectrum analyze the charge in the center of that space, you find harmonic exclusiveness. The steel and aluminum means that only a very low number of harmonics can propagate there. Harmonic exclusiveness, It is a low number of present harmonics. Any doctor can tell you will mean your heart is going to die. It's called HRV. Whereas the opposite, if you're in a building made of paramagnetic and biological materials and measure the capacitance at the center, you will find rich harmonic inclusiveness, the most number of present harmonics in spectrum analysis. And that predicts fractality, and that predicts ability to have and be life, and that's called sacred.
Huh. Very, very interesting. And would you say then that, I guess that these are interrelated and they affect each other and so forth, but what I was going to say was, does the environment affect the emotional state of a human being, and is it also the other way around, that our emotional state also actually affects the air or the environment around us? I guess that these two must kind of have some kind of relationship on each other, right?
Yeah, I think that's why it's called a dielectric.
That's right.
I think there's no dialectics, wasn't it? That's close. No, but you're right. The way we summarize that is to say that if you want to survive death and bliss and the solar wind, your DNA and your heart and your house and your town and your planet need to have a magnetic map that looks like a rose. That's the summary of fractality in the environment.
And it's solar wind you mentioned as well, because we can even protect ourselves against dangerous radiation. Is that what you're saying?
Right. Not that there's any evidence that increased carbon in the atmosphere is associated with temperature increase. They're wrong about that, but that's another question.
Well, okay. Well, yeah, I didn't mean this in the context of global warming or anything like that, but I just mean
but it's important in the context of global warming as well, because the opposite of warming is non-destructive compression. So if global warming were true, and it's not, then fractality would be the solution. But that's not even the issue. The issue is deeper, and that is the solar wind is coming.
Yes.
And the only way to steer that tornado is to be the center of it, and that requires fractality, in the same way that shamans steer tornadoes. Another way to look at it is that when a million children sing at the same moment, they measure the change in the solar flares, and that Uri Geller measured that focused human attention reduces radioactivity, and Bill Tiller measured that focused human attention compresses charge. The reason for all that is that human attention is a phase conjugate dielectric. It's a fractal field that's implosive. It creates centering force. And that's the only way we survive the solar wind. It's what the Mayans meant when they said, unless the dream spell of the old ones was alive and awake in symmetry space, we'd be blown away in the magnetic wind of the sun.
So can we tie this together then in regards to the potential increase? I remember just a few days ago on our website, we published articles that the solar winds, the CME, the coronal mass ejections from the sun is again picking up. We've been in a very kind of quiet phase at the moment, but this is something that's going to increase, possibly peak around 2011, 2012. Would you say that these people who aren't in a field like this, or in even an emotional state, or can focus their attention in this manner, could potentially be harmed by this? What do you think?
It's the same as the situation of the shaman trying to save his village when there's a tornado coming. When you see the bioplasmic streamers of the shaman enter the center of the tornado, you know that he's feeling its pain, which is its loss of fractality. And that's the beginning of his being able to steer it. And the same is true of the solar wind, that tornado that comes. So all environments that are fractal will experience less heat. All environments that are not fractal will experience more heat in that solar wind, more destructive interference. Practically speaking, that means, let's give you an example. In most cities where you have square metal everything, railroads, roads, everything, buildings, that is opposite to fractal, and so that's going to be the first to die. Now, there are some cities like Prague, which is actually a fractal meteorite crater whose magnetic map is literally a rose, that has a better chance of survival. And that's the definition of the chem in alchemy, which was invented there in many ways.
You're kidding. I didn't know that about Prague. I know that this is an ancient city. I know that the Templars and the Freemasons set up shop there a long time ago. Do you think that they got an eye on this stuff?
Well, this is our recent article, goldenmean.info/science of alchemy, was reviewing Vincent Bridges' film he made with us recently in London, which is there at the website. And, we had taught in our previous conferences in Prague years ago that the magnetic map of Prague is literally a rose. But Vincent pointed out even deeper than that, the early origin of Prague is a volcanic crater-like caldera apparently caused by a meteor. And that meteor was a very particular type of meteor which was a glass. And